For most people, a television show is just a television show. You watch it, you enjoy it, and when it ends, you move on. But every once in a while, something happens on a set that goes far beyond entertainment. Something real takes root between people who are only supposed to be pretending. And when that something finally comes to light, it changes the way you see everything you thought you already knew. That is exactly what has been happening with Christina Applegate and Ed O'Neill. After years of carefully worded interviews and politely deflected questions, Christina has begun pulling back the curtain on what their relationship was truly like. Not the version that publicists approved. Not the sanitized Hollywood story about grateful co-stars who stayed friends. The real version. The complicated, emotional, deeply human version that nobody in the entertainment press ever fully captured. And what she has revealed is extraordinary. The story begins long before any reunion conversation ever started. It begins on a soundstage in the late 1980s, where a teenage girl from the San Fernando Valley was trying to figure out who she was while simultaneously playing one of the most talked-about characters on American television. Christina Applegate was 15 when Married with Children first aired. 15. That age alone should give anyone pause, because the show she was starring in was not a gentle family comedy. It was provocative, boundary-pushing television that regularly made headlines for all the wrong reasons. And right in the center of that storm was a child who was still figuring out how to be a person. Ed O'Neill was already in his early 40s when the show launched. He had lived a full life before Hollywood ever paid serious attention to him. He had worked hard, struggled, been overlooked, and then finally broken through. He understood the industry in ways that a 15-year-old simply could not. And whether it was instinct, decency, or simply the kind of moral clarity that some people are lucky enough to carry with them through life, he recognized immediately that Christina needed protection. Not in a dramatic or theatrical way. Just quietly, consistently, every single day. Christina has described it in interviews as something she did not even fully appreciate at the time. When you are young and everything around you feels normal simply because it is the only world you have ever known, you do not always recognize when someone is going out of their way to look after you. She has said that it was only with the distance of years, looking back at what that environment actually was and what it could have done to a young woman without the right people around her, that she came to understand exactly what Ed had done for her. He was not playing a character when he protected her. That needs to be said clearly. Because in an industry where everything gets filtered through performance and image management, it is easy to assume that kindness on a set is just another form of good PR. But the things Ed did for Christina were never going to make the evening news. Nobody was filming them. Nobody was going to write about them. He drove her home after late shoots because he did not want her traveling alone at night through Los Angeles. He stepped into conversations that were heading somewhere inappropriate and redirected them without making a scene. He called her mother. He actually picked up the phone and called her mother to reassure a woman in another city that her teenage daughter was being looked after by someone who meant it. These are not the actions of a coworker. These are not even the actions of a mentor. Exactly. They are the actions of a parent. And Christina has been very deliberate in recent years about using that language. She has said that Ed O'Neill was a father figure to her in the truest possible sense of that phrase. Not a symbolic father figure. Not a metaphorical one. A real, present, consistent paternal force in her life during the years when she needed one most. What makes this revelation land so hard is the context surrounding it. The entertainment industry of the late 1980s and 1990s was not a safe place for young women. The stories that have emerged over the past decade about what went on behind the scenes of television and film productions during that era are genuinely disturbing. The power dynamics were ugly. The protections were minimal. The culture around young female performers was exploitative in ways that the public is only now beginning to fully reckon with. Christina Applegate was exactly the kind of person that environment preyed upon. Young, beautiful, talented, already famous, and surrounded by adults whose professional interests did not necessarily align with her personal well-being. Ed O'Neill made sure she got through it. And for a very long time, neither of them talked about it in those terms. When the reunion conversations began circulating in recent years, most people assumed the story was simple. Old co-stars getting back together, nostalgia for a beloved show, maybe a streaming special or documentary. The kind of thing that happens all the time in contemporary entertainment. But Christina's MS diagnosis in 2021 fundamentally changed the nature of what any reunion could mean. And it also cracked open something deeper in her relationship with Ed. Because when you are facing a chronic illness that has no cure, when your body is changing in ways you never anticipated, when the future you planned for yourself suddenly looks completely different, you find out very quickly who the real people in your life are. And Christina has been publicly clear about what she discovered. The people who showed up for her were not always the ones she expected. But Ed O'Neill was there. Immediately, genuinely, and in the kind of sustained way that matters far more than a single phone call or social media post. She has talked about what his response to her diagnosis meant to her. Not in general terms, but in specific ones. He did not offer platitudes. He did not send flowers and move on with his day. He showed up in the same way he had always shown up for her, which was quietly, consistently, and without asking for anything in return. The man who had protected a 15-year-old girl on a television set was still, decades later, doing the same thing for the same person, who is now a woman in her 50s dealing with something genuinely frightening. That continuity is what Christina has exposed. Not a scandal, not a betrayal, the opposite of both. She has exposed the fact that one of the most durable and meaningful relationships of her life formed on what the rest of the world always treated as the set of a crass, lowbrow sitcom. She has exposed the fact that the man playing television's ultimate deadbeat dad was, in private, one of the most genuinely caring presences she has ever encountered. The reunion that eventually did take shape was not the splashy network event that fans had been imagining for years. Given Christina's health, a traditional production was never going to be the right format. But what emerged was in many ways more honest and more powerful than any scripted revival could have been. When the surviving cast members came together, the dynamic between Christina and Ed carried a weight that nobody who watched it could ignore. There were no cameras capturing their private exchanges. But Christina has since described what it felt like to be in the same room with Ed again after everything she had been through. She has said that it felt like being recognized. Not in the celebrity sense, not in the way that fans recognize her when she walks down a street, but in the deepest sense. The sense of being seen by someone who has known you since before you fully knew yourself. Someone who watched you become the person you are and carries the memory of every version of you that existed along the way. She has also said something that surprised a lot of people who heard it. She said that being around Ed reminded her of who she was before the diagnosis. Not in a painful, nostalgic way. In a grounding way. Because he knew her from a time when she was fearless and young and just beginning. And being with him connected her back to that person. The person who existed before MS changed everything. And that connection, she has said, is something she cannot put a price on. What Christina has exposed about Ed O'Neill is ultimately something the entertainment industry is deeply uncomfortable with, because it does not fit any of the familiar narratives. It is not a story about abuse or exploitation. It is not a story about hidden romance or secret conflict. It does not involve lawsuits or tell-all books or any of the machinery that the press knows how to cover. It is simply a story about a good man who decided to look after someone who needed looking after, and who never stopped doing it across nearly 4 decades. That kind of quiet, persistent goodness is genuinely rare. And Christina knows it. She has said in interviews that she spent a long time assuming that what Ed did for her was just what decent people did. It took her years to understand that it was not. It took watching other people in similar situations, without anyone to advocate for them, without anyone to step in and set limits and say this far and no further, to understand that what she had been given was extraordinary. She was lucky. She has said that directly. She knows she was lucky, and she credits Ed O'Neill as one of the central reasons why. There's a moment that Christina has described from one of their recent conversations that has stayed with people who have heard it. She was talking about the MS, about the physical changes, about the days when things are hard. And Ed, in his characteristic way, did not offer sympathy. He did not tell her it was going to be okay in that hollow way that people do when they do not know what else to say. He told her that she had always been tougher than anyone gave her credit for. He said he had known that since she was 15 years old and walking onto a television set with more courage than most adults he had ever met. And then he said that nothing that had happened since then had changed his assessment of her. She has said that she cried, and she has said that she needed to hear it from him specifically, because he was the one person in her life who had actually been there from the beginning, who had watched the whole story unfold, whose opinion about who she was carried the weight of genuine witness. When he told her she was tough, she believed it, because he had the evidence. The exposure that Christina Applegate has undertaken in recent years is not the kind that generates tabloid headlines or late-night discussion segments. It is quieter and more significant than that. She has decided, in the face of a diagnosis that forced her to confront her own vulnerability in an extremely public way, to tell the truth about the people who shaped her, to give credit where it has been withheld for too long, to say out loud, for anyone who cares to listen, that Ed O'Neill was not just her television father. He was one of the most important people in her life. Full stop. Without qualification. Without the careful Hollywood hedging that usually surrounds these kinds of admissions. She has also made it clear that this is not a story she is telling for sympathy or attention. She is not looking for people to feel sorry for her. She has never been that kind of person, and the MS has not changed that. What she is doing, she has said, is simply telling the truth while she has the platform and the inclination to do it. Because the people who deserve recognition deserve it while they are still here to receive it. Ed O'Neill, for his part, has responded to Christina's revelations with characteristic restraint. He does not do emotional grandstanding. He does not perform his feelings for audiences. But in the moments when he has spoken about Christina in the context of her illness and their enduring friendship, something comes through that cannot be faked. He is proud of her, genuinely, deeply, parentally proud. Not of her awards or her career achievements, though he is proud of those too. Proud of the way she has handled something genuinely hard. Proud of the grace and the humor and the refusal to disappear that she has brought to the most difficult chapter of her life. He has said that watching Christina face a diagnosis publicly, with the same directness in which she brought to everything else she ever did not surprise him at all. He said he always knew she had it in her. He said that when you watch someone grow up, when you are present for the whole arc of a person's formation, you end up knowing things about their character that other people have to take on faith. He did not have to take Christina's courage on faith. He had watched her build it over 4 decades, and he knew it was real. What the reunion ultimately revealed, more than any scripted episode or nostalgic special ever could have, was that the most enduring thing Married with Children produced was not a television show. It was a family. Not a perfect one, not a simple one, but a real one. The kind that forms in unexpected places between unexpected people, and then refuses to dissolve when the circumstances that created it disappear. Christina Applegate walked onto a television set at 15 years old and found,